What matters is just being in the game and surviving long enough for some kind of random thing to happen that like finally makes your project financeable.
Welcome back to Rockstock Channel. It is Thursday, February 19th. My partner, Matt Fernley, and I are excited to have with us today a man who, during the past lithium boom, did perhaps more than anyone else to popularize the concept of DLE, direct lithium extraction. A co-founder of Lilac Solutions and an early and longtime strategic advisor to Vulcan Energy and many other DLE stories, Big Lithium's Alex Grant will talk smack about Arkansas, Texas, and other unconventional brine assets which hold promise to become sources of critical mineral lithium chemical supply, but also magnesium, for which the Western world is even more reliant. I reached out to Alex in October after he chaired the Arkansas Innovation Summit, which Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders was a key host and attracted some 900 people. And I'm wearing, for this occasion of the interview, a hat Alex sent me 4 or 5 years ago, suggesting we make Livent DLE again. Livent, now part of Rio Tinto, is invested in DLE technology provider Iliad, which we understand is being used as part of their Rincon operation in Argentina. Alex, who goes by the handle Big Lithium on X, has anything but rocks in his head. A Forbes 30 under 30 member in the energy space, Alex has attracted some world-class venture capital backers for Magrathea, including Sam Altman of OpenAI, which is a company he founded 3 years ago and we'll talk a bit about later after a deep dive into the current state of play of DLE projects in the US and elsewhere, and the overall Make America Great Again mining and processing environment we find ourselves in under President Trump. Alex has also attracted some prominent friends and family seed investors, including one of the OGs in the Tesla intelligentsia, Hyperchange's Gale Felice, who interviewed Alex a couple of weeks ago, and we recommend you watch that and is linked in the show notes below. A quick reminder, please visit blog.rkequity.com and register your email to receive Matt and my latest writings directly to your email box. And if you find this content valuable, please remember to like, subscribe, and share Rockstock Channel videos. It really helps grow our audience. Note, as always, that we may discuss individual stocks in this video, but we are not financial advisors and nothing in this video should be considered investment advice. Please do your own research and read the disclaimer at the end of this video. And finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors, USCF Investments, who have been making it easier to access commodities investment strategies for almost 20 years. USCF's Sustainable Battery Metal Strategy Fund, ZSB, is designed to capture exposure to metals powering electrification, including lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel, aluminum, and silver. And Lithium Royalty, which in December agreed to be acquired by Altius Minerals, a diversified royalty company based in St. John's, Canada. Altius seeks to create value through a diversified royalty portfolio. Lithium Royalty also holds a 1.5% gross revenue royalty on the Goulamina project in Africa, owned and operated by Ganfeng Lithium. And with that, welcome back, Alex Grant. It's been a few years. I think we've had you on once, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And we talked about DLE, we talked about some sediment projects, and we're going to kind of catch up on this, but you've been a bit out of lithium for the past 3 years. I remember you told me you were making a great living selling PDFs as an advisor to a lot of companies, you know, in the lithium space. But it was time for you to make a crack of it and do something very difficult, you know, in the magnesium industry. We'll talk about that. But your credentials in the DLE space had, I think, Jesse Edmondson want you to chair the Arkansas Innovation Summit. We've been trying for a few months to get you on to kind of speak about that. But Exxon, I mean, 900 people attended that, and we are going to talk about that first. You know, Exxon is getting close to making a final investment decision. The Standard Lithium and Equinor are getting close to making final investment decisions. You know, lithium prices have recovered substantially. So, the prices, I think, in their decks are closer to where the prices of lithium are today. But you did have a final investment decision and full financing take place for Vulcan Energy, which was a story that you had a significant role in, back in the day. So I guess the question is, you know, give us some feedback about what you heard and saw, from the Arkansas event in the first instance, and then we'll dig into it from there.
For sure, yeah. No, I can do that. Yeah, thanks for having me, Howard. It's good to be back. Nice to see you, Matt. So as yeah, just to reiterate a little bit what you said, just to frame my perspective. I worked in lithium for 5, 6 years. I was running a boutique consulting company for 3 or 4 years during the marvelous lithium boom of 2021, and was very close to some of the what are now the most advanced DLE projects in the world. I'm very proud of that work. And in 21, I had the great idea of not wanting to simply sell PDFs and work 30 hours a week, but instead to do something excruciatingly difficult, which is to start a primary magnesium metal company, which we'll talk more about later, as you mentioned. But since then, which is now 4 years ago, I have obviously, watched the lithium space and the DLE story from the corner of my eye just to see what's going on, because it's very interesting to me and I care a lot about it. And I think there's been lots of really impressive progress. And then I think it's clear that some of the names you mentioned are the category leaders, and if anyone has a chance of getting something built, it's them. So my understanding is we're just a couple of weeks or months away from Standard Lithium getting to FID. As you mentioned, Vulcan got to FID and received significant financial support from the European Union, which is very exciting. And of course now Rio Tinto is a lithium producer, which is different, and using DLE in multiple assets. So I think overall, around 10 years ago, when I started working in lithium and DLE, it was seen as really kind of a promise. And today, it is still perceived that way in many ways, because we haven't built a bunch of 20, 30,000 ton per year producing facilities yet. But it appears to me like the story has played out in the way that you would expect it. It just takes a lot of time to build these things, of course. So it looks like we're really gonna know the outcome of the DLE, hypothesis, I guess, in the next like 2 to 3 years. I, with these big projects now at FID, it's like it's make or break now. So yeah, we will see what happens. And it doesn't matter what you or I or anyone thinks. Like, it just depends on, can these projects demonstrate economics that are compelling, and can they raise the capital necessary to build them? Definitely, one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last 4 years is just how hard large capital projects are, not for the complex engineering or the permitting or anything like that, but just financing them is extraordinarily challenging. So yeah, hopefully they overcome those hurdles. So yeah, that's kind of the high level of what I've seen progress over the last 4 years.
One of the consistent things, one of the only consistent things in DLE projects over the last 4 or 5 years is that the CapEx and OpEx have gone in one direction.
Yeah.
What do you think, from the time that you're working in industry, what do you think is the major mistake that the early stage projects made in terms of thinking about DLE as a technology?
I think that, first of all, CapEx and OpEx will always be higher than China. It's just impossible. I mean, I can't, I've never heard of a mining or mineral chemical project that had lower capex and opex than China, built in the United States. Greenfield, brownfield maybe, but greenfield no. Um, I think that at the start of any project, whether it's DLE or sediment or even hard rock, I think that there's optimism and kind of a Pollyanna mindset that everything's going to go right and there won't be problems that'll weigh it down. To the credit of people like Standard and Lithium America, is like they kept going even though their cost numbers just got worse and worse as time went on. Because really, at the end of the day, like what matters is just being in the game and surviving long enough for some kind of random thing to happen that like finally makes your project financeable, like an election or whatever it may be. Um, so I don't know if it's so much that they made any mistakes. I just think that that as you go
Rose tinted
along,
glasses.
I think you always have rose tinted glasses at the start of a new project when it's brand new. And I would also layer on that I think inflation actually did play a pretty meaningful role in making some of these numbers go up, and especially like industrial, like kind of in industrial sectors where the US is trying to reindustrialize everything at the same time. What happens when you do that? You're driving up prices and in kind of categories that were kind of historically deprived of capital for expanding production, and you end up with bottlenecks. So I think a lot of stuff is bottlenecked.
In the case of Exxon, and Equinor, these are giant companies. I mean, financing really shouldn't be a problem, right? If the economics make sense. Lithium price volatility uh, can be a challenge because they don't know the market so well, and none of us, really know. So, at a given price, these companies understand and have super low costs of capital. So I guess when DLE kind of first came on the scene as a concept, a lot of stocks did very well. There was this thought that it would be low capex, low opex, very easy to scale, um, irrespective of the financing issue. So, is there a wake up call on that? The capex, opex, and ease with which these things can get into production.
Yeah. So I would say two things on that front, and these are really learnings I have from the last couple of years of working at Magnesium, honestly. One, even though it looks like Exxon or Equinor have more money than God and they can do anything, these folks are really they're stewards
Capitalist.
of their, well, no, the word I'm looking for is they are highly responsible stewards of their balance sheets, right? Like they protect their balance sheets and they have obligations to pay dividends to their shareholders, because like these are pension funds, and like maybe 1 billion of capex doesn't doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things for some of these companies, but their shareholders actually, I think, generally do still consider that a significant amount of capital to not be paying to them. So, and I don't think we need to. I think it's obvious to most people that shareholders of public companies really don't think a lot about the future, and they don't think about investing in the future in many ways. They really want to be paid out. So so I so that plus like just the how sclerotic these companies have become, and I don't mean any companies you named specifically. I mean virtually every big company in the Western world, right? At least 90% of them, they operate in really dysfunctional, slow, inefficient, yeah, broken ways. So even if something is a good idea, it could still take them 5 years to do it. And then there's a ton of random stuff that can get in the way of them actually pursuing a good idea. Like a CEO changes and then you do nothing for a year because everyone has to figure out what the new CEO wants to do, stuff like that. So that's one point I would make. Just because these big oil and gas names are in lithium doesn't mean they're actually going to do anything or do anything fast. The other point I wanted to make, which I also made on the panel in Little Rock in November, is that lithium has no trade protections from China. So in magnesium metal, I have a very kind of fortunate setup where since 1995, the US Department of Commerce has had an anti-dumping duty on Chinese magnesium that has varied between 95 and 140%, depending on the Chinese company and various other factors. And that makes the price of magnesium in the US structurally 2 to 3 times higher than in China. And it's been that way for decades under all different administrations. Lithium doesn't have that. And price volatility volatility is a challenge for investors funding these projects. Partly because I get the perception that they don't love lumpy cash flow. But more than anything, I think what really matters is that China can just choose the price of whatever raw material they want to control, and depress that price and make it impossible for Western producers to compete. And my understanding is that that's essentially what they've been doing in lithium for the last couple of years. You mentioned there's been some recovery in the price, which is good, but I'm not convinced that lithium or most critical materials will be producible economically and financeable in the West without trade protections from China. Again, like with magnesium, I'm profoundly blessed to have this anti-dumping duty. And all the rare earth companies, right, who are kind of making hay when the sun shines with the Pentagon over the last couple of months, are are basically pursuing, not dissimilar, uh, protections. So yeah, I think lithium needs to be better protected by the federal government from China. Now, magnesium is a bit different from lithium in that 95% of the world's magnesium is made in China, and there's zero production in the US. Um, there's zero production in South America. There's zero production in Europe. Well, there's a tiny amount in Brazil, but it doesn't really matter. So with lithium, you obviously have really significant production in South America. You actually do have some domestic production in the US. Um, so it kind of might seem less critical, but the fact that China controls still a majority of chemical production, or at least a plurality, means they're still able to control the price. And that's what really matters. So that was kind of a long answer to your question, but the point I did make in Little Rock was I think that state protection is going to be necessary, and I don't know if the Trump administration is going to do that or provide that to lithium specifically, because lithium is seen as like a democratic critical material, right? That it's kind of like less aligned with their identity politics, but I think there's really smart people at the Pentagon and White House who realize that that we absolutely need domestic lithium production, which is of course why they didn't just throw out Lithium America's LPO grant, or now we call it the energy dominance financing. um, so so anyways, I'll stop talking there, but yeah, that's kind of like high level how I think about the the kind of state support and protection from China that's going to be necessary to actually finance these projects, or at least very helpful.
Would it not be difficult to put in anti-dumping legislation in lithium because China isn't actually dumping? The issue that we have is their domestic price is very low, and that's the global price that everybody uses. What sort of mechanisms do you think could actually be used to sort of make a more regional sort of North American price?
Um, well, you could put anti-dumping duties on Chile and China. That's a possibility. I think that would be the majority of the world's lithium chemical. I think Chile has a conservative government right now, so that's maybe less likely. And I don't think there's any anti-dumping duties on any Chilean products. I've never heard of it. But
We have a
I'm
free
definitely
trade
not.
agreement with
Yeah,
Chile.
I mean, we have a free trade agreement. We have, what was formerly known as NAFTA also, but we've also put tariffs on China, right? So, or on Canada. Wow, what a Freudian slip on Canada. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
but um, but no, I mean, I'm sure there's like domestic incentives that could be cultivated, like tax refunds, or um, obviously the conditional loan guarantees that the Office of Strategic Capital have been dishing out have been huge for getting projects financed. Um, but um, but yeah, I think it's the stability of the price that really freaks people out. And China, just because they don't control 95% of the world's lithium production, doesn't mean they still can't control the price.
Oh yes,
100%.
but
And
the point I'm making is that they're not a net exporter of lithium; they're a huge net importer of lithium. So they're controlling their domestic price,
Yeah,
and we're using their domestic price for the rest of the world. So I would, we need to find a way to move ourselves away from using that domestic price in the US and Europe.
right. Right. I mean, maybe that also comes down to, I mean, you can't really expect buyers to ever do anything logical. They'll always just want to use the lowest possible price, right? But that goes back to my point, which is like, if they're citing the price of lithium in China as the price, that means they're implying that they're able to buy from China. So whatever China decides is the price of lithium in China is the price in the US, as you said. So China still has control over the price globally, regardless of the import-export balance. I think that's my impression. I'm not like a resource economist, but like, yeah, that's just my read.
Alex, you say though that magnesium has had 2 or 3 times higher prices in America, but we're still 95% reliant on China. So, um, are Americans buying the Chinese price with that higher tariff? And why hasn't that incentivized supply of magnesium domestically?
Well, what that anti-dumping duty was doing for 30 years was protecting the sole producer in Utah, U.S. Magnesium. They had a catastrophic equipment failure 4 years ago. It was weirdly the exact same month that we started working on magnesium. Very strange coincidence. And that knocked them out within 6 months. So they've produced virtually zero magnesium metal for almost 4 years now. And it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to recommission that plant. And if you know anything about the owner of U.S. Magnesium, Ira Renner's firm, they are not known for investing capital in fixing old assets or even in maintenance. So, which is kind of explains what happened to the plant. Um, so, what that anti-dumping duty serves now is to allow Magrathea to rebuild domestic production, basically after US Mag has gone down. And the government had asked us what we want done with the anti-dumping duty, and we basically just say like, obviously we need it for the next decade at least. Long term, we don't think we'll necessarily need it, because once we build larger plants, the unit economics become, basically head to head with competitive with China. But in the short term, we definitely need it. Um, so that anti-dumping duty is still serving the purpose of maximizing the probability that domestic magnesium metal is produced.
Okay, I definitely want to get into more about magnesium and what you're doing at Magrathea, but I want to, I guess I'm going to summarize a little bit some of your thoughts there about like the Exxons and the Equinors, even though they have more money than God, um, they still act like, um, they're competing projects at these companies. So the people who are working on the lithium project, that's just one project. There are hundreds of projects across
Yep.
these companies, and then they need to get to kind of like higher and higher board levels, and eventually, you know, they may have money to spend $10 million here, $50 million there. But when it comes to making a
Yeah.
final investment decision on $1 billion and it's coming in front of the entire board, it could get knocked down, right? And the mid-level people who are promoting this project have to come to them and make convincing arguments to them. And when there's price volatility like this, it's exactly the same kind of like that board acts as the public market does to a junior, right? To basically say, I don't know, Lithium. I mean, this analyst says that, Morgan Stanley tells me it's going to be a bear market for 10 years. So like, so there's a lot of noise out there, and these are the most capitalist companies in the world, right? Like, ostensibly, right? Big oil is not supposed to be subsidized, right? They're not looking for handouts from the government, et cetera. Although, they there are subsidies embedded in various forms, in that industry, and they have very strong, lobbying groups. But I think fundamentally, these projects need to pencil out, and at $10,000, they weren't penciling out. But now they might be penciling out at $24,000, a ton. But in the case of Vulcan, I mean, they did get. You talk about like the political support, Democrat versus Republican. In Europe, they still like lithium, and there was a lot of government support for Vulcan. So things could pencil out if you have not only tariffs, a local domestic price, but there are all sorts of tools that China uses, like low cost loans and free land and investment tax credits and other things. And so it's kind of like to be seen. So what's your, I mean, you commented this is like I think the narrative is shifting, right, Alex? And I think in your Galley interview, you said it also, right? Where now it's not all net zero sustainability, it's military, it's AI, that narrative is shifting, and that narrative applies not only to rare earths and magnets, but certainly to batteries, which, the military needs lots and lots of batteries. I've done a lot of research. The average soldier carries around with him 25 pounds worth of battery electronics. And batteries are being used in, XAI and Google's data centers, even if they're natural gas powered plants. So to win AI, to win the future of the military, I think lithium is being reframed this way, or will be reframed this way. And then I'm thinking, so the broader question is, again, you've been a very big, DLE proponent, but there's a lot of hard rock spodumene. When looking at DLE projects in the Smackover, or DLE in the Salton Sea, or in the Paradox Basin, or the Great Salt Lake, or in the Leduc Reservoir, or in sediments in Nevada, or in hard rock, in Quebec and Ontario, what should the government and the market pick, right? Should they pick, the Smackover, right? Like what should drive, or should they not pick anything, or should they just focus on, market structure issues, like maybe tariffs, or maybe like strategic reserves? I've written about that, right, to address the price volatility, and then let the market kind of compete. So how do you view all of that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much there. So first of all, I want to make a point that these these building these projects these are state projects. Like I think about, the Soviet Union building a uranium enrichment plant. It's just like it's got the same. They have to have like the same patina. Like free markets will not build these assets. No, absolutely no way. That is just not how it works. And anyone who thinks that how it works, I think, has been educated over the last couple of years, or hasn't thought about it enough yet. Like, these are state projects, unless they're like small and there's some kind of unique geology that makes it hyper economic for whatever reason. Like the Thacker passes and I mean, there's only the only Trump 2 backed lithium projects. I don't really want to necessarily name any others, but like these really big projects are state projects. You need state support. There's absolutely no way around it. I I I am like I totally believe that. Um, on and then to sort of dovetail in on the narrative front and the storytelling front, right? That allows these projects to become state-backed projects and allows these projects to be financed with some portion of private capital, whether it be equity or debt. Um, I think a lot of these projects have done a successful job or are in the process of doing a successful job of rotating into the defense and AI storytelling as you described. I think lithium 100% for sure is necessary for national security. I think anyone who doubts that, needs to go look at the numbers that you cited, right? Um, and I think that lithium has a big role to play for energy storage for AI too, of course. Just as an example, Redwood Materials raised like I think it was over $400 million a couple months ago, and they didn't raise that money for battery recycling. Now, I don't have insider information, and this is just from what a couple of folks have told me who were involved at a high level, but they didn't raise that money saying that they were going to go build giant battery recycling plants and make lithium chemicals and nickel sulfate and cathode. They raised that money to repurpose old batteries for data centers to improve, the economics of AI. So they succeeded at telling that story. That's awesome. I think, yeah, lithium is in the process of telling that story better because obviously the decarbonization story is totally dead. Don't shoot the messenger, but it's pretty obvious at this point that I think Europe's 2 or 3 years
In the
behind us.
US, in the
In the
US,
U.S.,
it's dead.
well, I would say though, Matt, like when I go to Europe, I don't hear the same confidence in it that I heard 5 years ago that I heard in the U.S. too. I I think that the war in Ukraine is like really weighing on people and thinking and in terms of like portfolio allocation for like what really matters for keeping people safe and prosperous. Decarbonization isn't top of the list anymore. So I think that it's like a lagging. I think there's like a lagging thing going on where people are still talking about it because their bosses or boards or whoever told them 2, 3 years ago to talk about it, but that'll be updated in the next like year or two, and they won't be talking about it nearly as much in Europe or the UK either, unfortunately. Um, so and then of course like Magrathea we went through the exact same thing. I mean, we started as a decarbonization project, right? Like we were going to make carbon neutral light metal from seawater. And guess what? We actually did make metal from seawater. And guess what? Like we did do an ISO compliant life cycle assessment showing we could make carbon neutral primary light metal. That's literally possible by the laws of physics. And could be economic. But over the last 2 years, and this preceded Trump's second election or third election, depending on who you ask. Um, so like we we won a $19.6 million investment from the Pentagon 3 years ago, right? Like that was 2 years. I was halfway through the Biden admin, and that's when it started shifting already. And obviously after Trump got elected, I mean, uh, there's absolutely no reason for us to focus on any storytelling other than national security and reindustrialization, which was always part of the project. It was always like we didn't change the story really in any way. We just stopped talking about decarbonization because they're both completely legitimate story arcs for Magrathea. And weirdly, we end up doing the exact same thing. Like literally, the work on the ground that the engineers do is literally identical. Either way, we didn't change anything. So it was like with Redwood, they would have, like, presumably completely changed their business plans and everything they're going to do and who their customers are, etc. But in our case, we changed nothing. It's just storytelling. It's just the veneer on top. So so I think I touched on like the key kind of topics that you were oxygenating there. Um, yeah, I think that
You did
yeah.
You did, Alex, and but fundamentally, you're saying these are state projects, so the free markets won't finance projects. Therefore, is every project going to be a picked winner? So is that like the only way we get lithium projects off the ground, or more Thacker passes that the government, and GM and companies like that back? And if so, if you think that, do you think it, the government's going to like back? I mean, Standard Lithium is looking for an export import bank loan. So I think that's likely, but you think they'll have to, you think they're going to subsidize Exxon?
I think that the government does have to and will pick winners. And, the Republicans used winner picking as like a slur against the Democrats for like, you know, 8 or 10 years after the after this Solyndra LPO grant after that failure, which of course, let me remind your listeners, was the same program that financed Tesla's manufacturing line in Fremont that was wildly successful and created, you know, $1 to $2 trillion of market cap in the United States. You're welcome, right? So yeah, they do and will pick winners. It is absolutely necessary, and that's why like I think about the this kind of poetic like literary archetype of the picked winner is the Soviet uranium enrichment plant. Like that's what our plants are going to kind of look like. They're going to be blessed by the government and they're going to be chosen, and it's just simply not a matter of economic competition between private companies. That's just not what's happening. And the current Trump administration is showing that very clearly. Like, I actually think a lot of what they're doing on industrial policy is super smart and exactly what's necessary. Basically, building, Soviet uranium enrichment plants is like literally what we should be doing. Um, I hope that metaphor is kind of coming through, but yeah, I think a lot of the deals that the White House and the Department of Commerce and the Pentagon have done over the last year have been basically picked winners, and I don't see another mechanism that's gonna beat that or potentially even succeed in the absence of that. I think I think what the Biden admin was doing could have worked, but it would have just been like slower. Um, so
Look, they
I
were
think what
picking winners, and
yeah.
they picked winners, and the Republicans are picking different winners, or maybe some of the same winners. But there's a lot of stuff that the Energy Department and the War Department are inheriting, that started under Biden, and they're evaluating and prioritizing, and but they're now allocating a ton more money to, hundreds of billions of dollars, is what David Copley, said at Davos. It's only 12 billion, as Project Vault, but they've announced a number of rare earths deals, a tungsten deal in Kazakhstan. So it's coming, and so I wanted to dig into that, because you have been tapping into some government money, and so there's venture capital dollars, and then there are big project development dollars. Depends on where you are in your development cycle. But I'll have Matt dig in a second. But I do want to flash up, your pinned tweet here from like March 2022, which basically said, "Good morning to everyone except the boomers who shipped all the Western world's metal and chemical processing capabilities to China in the early 2000s because McKinsey told them it would make their stonks go up." Right. So that,
I
I mean,
simply
you were spot
I have
on.
no not like bad morning to you. Bad morning to you, sir, whoever you are out there. You screwed up.
And now Scott Bessent is saying, we were asleep at the switch, and Howard Lutnick saying the same thing. And we've been saying this for a long time, as well, on this channel and through our endeavors. RK Equity for 23, 24 years has been, feeding the China beast, right? But now we just went too far, right? And Simon Moore's, testified in front of Congress saying that we've been a bystander. So here we are. Let's dig into Magrathea. Matt, you could ask some of these questions we have, but you decided to stop, writing PDFs and do the hard task as you described a bit. So why magnesium? How much money have you raised so far? And what are the next steps and milestones? You're a private company, so we're typically promoting here on this channel public companies, but someday, you may SPAC or come public in some other way, Alex. But yeah, just tell us about your journey and why our listeners should care about magnesium.
Sure. So the mythology I like to use is I was I was on a Greek island in 2021 selling PDFs as you mentioned and doing quite well through the lithium boom. It was fantastic. I'm really grateful for all those experiences. But I'm very much an engineer and clearly a masochist because I didn't want that easy life. I was too young. I was 29 years old and too young to be retired, basically. Um, and I wanted to throw myself back into the crucible, back into something super hard. So I started over the course of 2021. I started incubating some project ideas, and I eventually winnowed it down to magnesium. And the reason why I decided to work on magnesium is because a friend at Tesla had the idea to work on mag because it's the lightest metal. So our thinking went that batteries were making vehicles much heavier, and there was an increased need to lightweight them because dead weight in vehicles is always a bad thing. Only it only causes problems. It only reduces efficiency. It only makes products worse. So I combine that with my knowledge around brines, since I was taking lithium out of salty waters all over the place, including magnesium chloride brines in Utah, working with clients who were kind of seeking my input on those projects. And I realized we could also make magnesium metal a structural light metal, the lightest metal, lighter than aluminum, lighter than steel by a large factor, from seawater. And I thought that was like kind of crazy, like kind of incredible. Like that offered a that offered a tool for humanity that we never had before to separate our need for structural metal from open pit mining, which only becomes more expensive as time goes on. And especially with the ESG narrative at the time, that was a pressure that was only going to make mining more and more expensive too. So so I wound down my boutique consulting over the course of 22 into 23, started Magrathea in 22, January of 2022, raised a $2 million angel round from Sam and a couple other, fantastic CEO friends and a couple funds in March of 22. And that was the exact same time Russia invaded Ukraine the second time. So we thought the invasion of Ukraine was going to be a bad thing in the middle of our fundraise, but unfortunately, it was kind of a good thing because it radically accelerated the narrative around deglobalization and critical supply chain onshoring. So so we got in the lab, started making metal. A year later, raised a $10 million seed round from some of the world's best VCs, and that allowed us to build a pilot, which we've now done over the last couple of years, and we're now preparing to scale up in a real commercial joint venture in Arkansas, which we're excited about. But why, like, to fully answer your question, like, why magnesium, right? Why does it matter? Obviously, as I mentioned, we were really enthralled with its kind of lightweighting properties, and that still is extremely exciting in the long term. But in the short term, there's zero primary production in the United States. There's zero primary production in Europe. All of NATO has virtually zero primary production, and China and Russia control, upwards of 95% of the world's magnesium metal production. And that is a problem because you have no defense industrial base without mag. You don't even have, I don't even know if you have a non-defense industrial base because you need magnesium to make every single aluminum alloy. You have no aluminum industry without magnesium supply. So the fact that China controls magnesium production actually means that they control our aluminum industry. And if they want, they can just flick a switch and turn off our production of all aluminum alloys, which shuts down all auto manufacturing. Every single car has aluminum alloys and magnesium alloys in them, for that matter. Shuts down even steel making. There's a whole bunch of different types of steels that need magnesium in the production process for desulfurization. It shuts down titanium production, so you need magnesium to make titanium. It shuts down beryllium, boron, hafnium, and zirconium production, which you need for nuclear and defense and electronics and other applications. So the problem of magnesium supply is, from first principles, the exact same problem as rare earths. Exact same problem. It's this material that's needed to make pretty much anything, and it's needed across the entire economy, and you have no defense industrial base without it. So that is a reason why the Pentagon backed us, almost 3 years ago now, and it's a reason why we won't give up. I mean, we're going to do everything possible to make this happen, because it's just too important. So
Alex, why
yeah.
hasn't China weaponized magnesium in the way that they have, not only rare earths, but, gallium, graphite, if that, even a hint of that? I've never heard of them threatening, it would be catastrophic if they did.
So in 2021, they actually did shut down the magnesium smelters. Kaiser Aluminum in the US, one of our biggest aluminum companies that serves the big three automakers, cut production by 50% and declared force majeure. The price went up 3 or 4x. There was one big three automaker who was weeks away from shutting down manufacturing at one of their production lines because of magnesium supply. That actually already happened in 2021. Why have they not done it in the last year as a tool to negotiate with Trump on tariffs? I think because it would start a war. It's just like, it's too important to the economy and the defense industrial base.
So
I
rare
actually heard
earths
a
are not
quote from
as
someone.
important.
Like, I don't want to be the magnesium guy who says that, because it sounds kind of obnoxious, but other people have said that. Um, right? Other people have said that, I will say. Uh, and I believe it. I mean, and I don't believe it just because I'm the magnesium guy. I legitimately think that magnesium is the most insane national security problem we have, or top 10 for sure. I mean, rare earths are up there, of course, but
So why isn't the government coming in and fixing Ira Renner's thing in Utah?
the state of Utah just bought U.S. Magnesium out of bankruptcy, and their stated aim is to shut it down permanently, because it was, as far as I know, the only operating Superfund site in the United States, when it went down 4 years ago. That's how badly we needed that plant to run. It was allowed to continue running, even though it was, kind of a terrible pollution site. Um, so they don't want that thing running anymore. They want it cleaned up, and they want new, cleaner technology implemented either at that site or nearby or somewhere else in the United States. And they want more responsible parties making magnesium, and of course other critical minerals in the US.
So this is a Superfund site. Utah is shutting it down, but isn't their parent, like the Pentagon, right, who gave you $19.6 million as an early stage thing? Why aren't they panicked about and talking to the Utah governor and saying, no, we need to keep this going, right? And separately from that, yours is a new technology. I imagine that was an older technology. Why isn't there some greenfield magnesium project? What do you need to make a conventional magnesium project a reality, in America?
So it would probably cost on the same order of magnitude of capex to recommission that old plant and to make it like compliant with modern environmental, like, regulations, especially. would probably go into the mid hundreds of millions of dollars, which would be basically the same cost of building a new one. So
But
because that
that's a
plant is
small.
such an
Thacker Pass is $3 billion. Thacker Pass is $3 billion. Hundreds of millions is not a lot, given
well
you know
because
the apocalyptic scenario
yeah
you just outlined for magnesium.
because it will end up costing around the same, and our technology's now proven at pilot scale and is now being scaled up and commercialized. Uh, you might as well invest in the vastly more efficient new generation of technology. That's, of course, what I will say, but it's also what I believe. And I think that would be the right
Okay, but
capital allocation.
there are lots of lithium projects. There's got to be more than just your magnesium project, though, right? Like, so aren't there? Why isn't like the government saying we need to make multiple bets and put billions of dollars into these multiple bets?
I think that's a great idea. They should do that.
Okay.
Time will tell.
Again,
I think the
given it,
Pentagon, especially
gi-
right now, the Pentagon right now is very focused on rare earths and gallium and germanium because of the export controls. I think that magnesium is on every critical minerals list ever written by the US government, and they're very aware of the problem set. I think that it is inevitable that there's going to be a lot more support for mag.
okay. Magnesium. When I first heard this story from you, and you handed me a very light piece of magnesium. It reminded me of our friends Tazo Arima, and Hyperion X, which is looking to make titanium, commercializing University of Utah technology, and they're at beyond pilot, and they have a billion market cap. But I understood that magnesium is actually an input into their titanium process as well. But uh, they're looking not only to enter the titanium market, but if they could make titanium cheaper, than aluminum and steel. I mean, titanium strength to weight ratio, it's luxury golf clubs and luxury watches. But if the price is lower, it could displace, a fair bit of the aluminum and stainless steel sector. Could you, and a lot of our viewers understand, Hyperion X a little bit. How should we think about that? Are you competitive to titanium? If you like, because you're not only looking to create magnesium supply, you're using a new technology which could be lower cost, or are you complementary to the titanium supply chain, vis-a-vis the steel and aluminum supply chain?
Yeah, I think what Tazo is doing is awesome. We're pretty complementary considering that, as you mentioned, they actually need magnesium to make titanium. Um, Titanium and auto has been discussed for a long time. I don't know if any commercial production of Ti and auto has ever happened. I've seen prototypes of titanium for automotive applications, but I don't know if anything entered serial production ever. Magnesium has been in as magnesium has been used in cars for almost 100 years in serial production. Every single car on the road has magnesium in it today. So if cars started out by being almost entirely steel in terms of the metal content with no aluminum, and then over time, aluminum has grown to take a really healthy chunk of that, of what steel used to be in auto, and magnesium was a kind of a sliver. Titanium is still kind of pressed up against the axis of zero. Um, so that doesn't mean titanium can't work in auto. It absolutely can, but it really ultimately comes down to the cost, right? So what Hyperion X will need to show is that on a kind of functional strength adjusted basis, they can make titanium that's cheap enough to be competitive with aluminum and magnesium. So if that makes sense. So like it's totally possible to grow the Thai market, but ultimately the question is what's the production cost, and that's the exact same story for aluminum, and that's the exact same story for magnesium too.
Right. Okay. Uh, So where are you? You raised 2 million seed, 10 million in Series A. You got 19.6 million from the Department of War. Have you raised any other capital, or and where are you in terms of actually generating real revenue, profits, timing wise, and prospectively, going public, and what? Yeah. How much do you expect to produce, enter the market, and how do you grow from there?
Yeah. So high level, this is our trajectory. We have just recently finished piloting at a 2 ton per year scale. That was very successful. We made metal that basically met spec. We proved the main things we needed to prove on a chemistry level to know that the process will work. We're now scaling that process to commercial scale. So there's one scale up step left. That's it. We're building a demonstration plant in Arkansas as part of a joint venture. That will have a nameplate capacity of around 200 tons, and it will actually demonstrate commercial scale technology. There will be no more scale up after that. That demonstration plant will be making metal in late 27 if things go well, into 28. And that will underpin the support, finance, etc., for a full commercial plant that will make on the order of 10,000 tons per year in Arkansas. So if things go really well, that could be as early as 29, 30, that kind of range. And it's possible there could be a go public strategy in between. In 2 years from now, we will be 2 years away from EBITDA. So if that's not the right time to go public to raise a couple $100 million to build this plant, then, I don't know what going public is for, really, because that seems like at a very appropriate time and capitalization path to build that project. But ultimately it depends on, where we're going to be at, where the market's going to be at, etc. So we can't, choose this too far in advance. We'll have to, basically gather information, kind of see what makes the most sense in 2028 timeframe.
Okay. And so the 200-ton demo plant that you're ramping from 2 tons, is that financed, or are you raising capital for that?
That is financed by the Pentagon, our joint venture partner, and some extra private capital that's going to be coming in the next little while here.
Okay. And what does magnesium price go for in the market?
In the U.S. today, the price is $7,000 to $7,500 a ton for pure magnesium.
Okay. So that'll make you what, a 75 million revenue business, from 2029 at the 10,000 tons?
Plus the co-product of chlorine, which we'll have a binding offtake agreement for. So on the order of 100 million.
Okay. And that'll cost a couple $100 million. And then once you do that, is there like an endless supply is your joint venture partner, is that seawater, is it? Or what's the raw material? Like, do you have a resort, your technology going to make a plant, but what's the input cost?
The
The raw material
the
to
main
make the,
the magnesium will be produced from a combination of dolomite, which is basically limestone with magnesium in it, and Smackover brine. And it's a tail brine from a bromine plant that's being built right now.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is along the lines of what the government's trying to do in like germanium as part, out of the alumina making process, and rare earths out of coal ash or whatever. There's all sorts of materials, from waste. So that's your raw material source. Okay.
Essentially, yeah, it's a chemical plant integration that makes the whole kind of chemical campus, more robust and more economic by putting it all together. And I think there's lots of examples of that.
Okay. That sounds great. I think we've been on for about an hour, Alex. I don't have any more questions. It's great to have your perspective on lithium, and our audience, I think a lot of our audience remembers you, from Lithium, and again, you are at Big Lithium on X, and you were asked to chair the Smack Over. Uh, you did go to the Future Minerals Forum. I think I saw some posts of yours on LinkedIn, and there have also been some chummy photos of you and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that as a closing comments.
Yeah, so high level, I think that Saudi Arabia is doing a lot of interesting things right now in terms of industrialization and diversification of their economy. And I and many other people believe that some presence in the Gulf, especially Saudi, right now is really important for kind of keeping close to that story and seeing how it goes, whether for building plants there or financing plants in the U.S. So that's why I went to Future Minerals Forum. And then my buddy Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I met at the governor's mansion in Little Rock in November when I attended that conference. I was very lucky to be invited to like a CEO dinner, and we actually hit it off by talking about trout fishing. So her sons were out trout fishing with her husband that day, and I am an avid fly fisherman, so we started talking about trout fishing, and she actually gave me her number to send me some fly fishing recommendations, which has been very helpful because we actually quoted her in our announcement of our joint venture in December, uh, and um, and yeah, she's showing that Arkansas really wants to kind of roll out the red carpet for people to build there. Like they're very serious about supporting industrial projects. It's like white glove service. So so yeah, I feel really lucky to have had the chance to develop that relationship. And I think as we build this project in Arkansas, the state and the governor will be, very supportive and very helpful along the way.
Thank you very much, Alex, for joining us and sharing your knowledge. And good luck. You've made great progress, and we'll be watching with great interest to make America great for magnesium again.
Let's go. Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Matt.